All right, we're back for Tuesday, April 14th, and the lesson for today, which is a continuation of yesterday's lesson on 9-1. So this is your bell ringer. This should look like what we worked on yesterday. So as I said yesterday, pause the video, take some time to work on it, and then I'll share the answer in a minute. Okay, so they want the vertex, axis of symmetry, and y-intercept. Vertex right down there looks like 0, 1, 2, 3, -4. 0, -4. Not moving left to right at all, but then moving down 4. Axis of symmetry then will be x equals 0 because our dotted line would be right down the middle, and the y-intercept is going to be -4. So hopefully that went well if you did well on yesterday's lesson. Alrighty. So now we are here. So the difference between yesterday and today is that today we're not going to be looking at graphs. We're going to be looking at equations like this one. And we're going to have to find the same 3 things we found yesterday, but we're going to do them algebraically, right? We're going to use that formula we saw yesterday in the beginning of the lesson and different things like that, okay? So they want the vertex, axis of symmetry, and y-intercept. I'm not going to write them in that order this time. I'm going to start off with the easiest one, and I mentioned this yesterday. So the y-intercept is always your C term or your constant, right? So in this case, it is right there, -2. Like I said, it's the number that's by itself, does not have a variable with it. It's usually the last term of your equation if it's written in standard form, which is something we're going to need to talk about. So that's a good place to start. That's definitely the easiest one. Next, we're going to look at the axis of symmetry. And if you would jump back to earlier on in this, I guess yesterday's video technically, we had something that said for your axis of symmetry, x equals -b over 2a. Now that a, b, and c are referring to the coefficients in our trinomial. And we should hopefully know that from last chapter in factoring. Remember, we would say if a is 1, right, we just draw our x. Or if a is not 1, you have to do your AC method and multiply a times c, which is your first number and your last number and different things like that, okay? So b is going to be the middle number, or the number with the x if it's written in standard form. And a is going to be your leading coefficient, which is with your x squared term. So if I just use the space over here to work, it's going to say x equals negative, because of the formula having a negative right there. So -b, and b is -8. So I'm going to use parentheses to substitute in our -8 over 2 times, so 2 times, and then a in our equation is -2. So maybe even just up here, even though it's going to be a little bit sloppy. A, B, and C are there, and there. A is -2, B is -8, C is also -2. And then we just need to simplify this. So -8 is a +8, and 2 times -2 is -4. So that's 8 divided by -4. I'm just going to have to go off to the side a little bit. That's -2. So our axis of symmetry is x equals -2. -b over 2a is our formula for that, and we get -2. Our vertex, and this is why we found the axis of symmetry first. As we said yesterday, the vertex and the axis of symmetry are the same in that the x-coordinate of our vertex is always the same number as our axis of symmetry. So that means our vertex is going to be -2 because that's a -2 right there. So now the only remaining question is, how do we find the y-coordinate of our vertex? The way that we're going to do that is we need to substitute this -2 that we just found back into the original equation. Okay, and there are different ways to do that. I will use the space down here to show you kind of what that should look like, at least as an initial setup. It's going to look like -2 times -2 squared minus 8 times -2 minus 2. All I'm doing is taking our original equation from up here and substituting in a -2 anywhere we see an x. Now I can figure that out algebraically in my head or whatever I want to do, but you'll probably want to use a calculator, I would think. So you can jump over to whichever calculator you're using, whether it's that app I shared with you that you can download on your phone, or from what I understand, there's a calculator app that they've downloaded onto the Chromebooks. Make sure you have that. Being that today's Tuesday, try to use that right now because we're going to need it on Thursday or Friday. So that way, if you're not able to find it or it's not working, you can let me know. And then we have all day tomorrow during our office hours to get that sorted out before it's really necessary for you. But no matter what you're using, let's see, this would be -8 plus 16, which is 8 minus 2, which is 6. So that's 6, so it's -2 comma 6 for our vertex. All right, so some of you are probably feeling like that was a lot and it was sloppy and everything else, so let's look at another one and hopefully it makes more sense. So again, let's start out with the y-intercept. That's always the easiest. It is -2 again, right? It's right there. Axis of symmetry. We'll do it over here again. So it's x equals -b over 2a. So in this case, it's -6, because b is 6, right? We can do a little ABC if we need to, over 2 times 3. A is 3. -6 over 2 times 3. So -b over 2a. -6 over 2 times 3 is 6. And -6 divided by 6 is -1. So our axis of symmetry is x equals -1. Right, you're always going to use that formula, x equals -b over 2a, for your axis of symmetry. That's all we're doing there, is we're substituting in and simplifying. And then again, for our vertex, we already know that -1 is going to go as our x-coordinate. Now we're going to have to substitute in. So again, you might just jump over and start typing this into your calculator, right? But I'll write it out here. Y equals 3 times -1 squared plus 6 times -1 minus 2. And that's going to be 3 minus 6, which is -3, minus 2, which is -5. So -1, -5. And that's what we need on this one. All right. Now we're going to look at one more thing today, and then we'll have you jump over to a huddle. All right. And this is pretty easy. All right. I think you'll have a maybe an easier time with this than what we just looked at. Determine whether the function has a maximum or a minimum value. Okay. all we need to look at on these is our a term, right? Since our a term is just a negative there, that means a is really -1. The way we're figuring this out is if a is positive, then when you look at the graph, that was kind of sloppy. When you look at the graph, you're going to see a U shape, which, as we mentioned yesterday, is called a parabola. If a is negative, then instead of seeing this U shape, so here I'm just going to say a equals positive. A is a positive number, okay? Instead of seeing the U shape, we're going to see an upside down U if a is a negative number, okay? So you should have that in your mind. That's something you're just going to want to sort of keep in mind as we move forward. And that's going to help us on these questions. They're going to ask us, do these have a maximum or a minimum value? Well, if it's an upright U, like the first one that I drew there, right, your vertex would be the minimum of that. It's the lowest point. Whereas if it's an upside down U, upside down parabola, you're going to have a maximum for your vertex because that's the highest point on your graph. Okay, so that means, going back to this particular question, since a was -1, or just a negative in general, that means it's an upside down U, which means this one has a maximum. Okay, and if you want to check that, you can even type that into your calculator and hit graph. You're going to see an upside down parabola. Okay, so now the question is, for part B, they actually want us to state the maximum or minimum value. They actually want us to find it. Well, like we said, this is some sort of upside down parabola. We don't know where exactly it is on the graph, but the maximum is going to be wherever the vertex is. That has to be the highest point of this parabola. So this is just another way for them to ask us to find the vertex. I'm not going to walk through that process because we already have. I'll talk through it quickly. You're going to have to do your x equals -b over 2a, right, to find your x coordinate. So in this case, that would say -2 over over 2 times -1. Negative b, so I'll put these up here, a, b, c. Right, so negative b would be -2 over 2a, and a is -1. So if you simplify that, that's +2 over -2, which is -1. So you figured out that the x-coordinate of your vertex is -1. Then you substitute that back in to find the y-coordinate of your vertex. But for the sake of time, you have it right there, right? So it says the maximum value is -1. That means that the y-coordinate of our vertex is -1. I'm going to prefer to see these as an ordered pair, which means for our answer, I would like you to write -1, -1. Okay, so just so you don't get confused here, they found the -1 we found by using the -b over 2a. They substituted that -1 in, and they got a -1 back out. I know it's a little confusing because you're seeing a bunch of -1s, but that's what happened. So that's why the vertex is -1, -1. Next one, I only have one more problem here. Okay, let's consider that, determine whether it has a maximum or minimum value. So again, all we got to do is look at our a value, which in this case is 2. That means that if I would graph this, it would be a regular upright U shape, and that means we have a minimum. We have a lowest point on our graph, which is our vertex, right? And then to find it, you're just going to find your vertex. So again, you're going to do x equals -b over 2a, which is going to look like -4 over 2 times 2. That's positive 4 over 2 times 2 is 4, which is 1. So it's 1 comma something. And this, whenever it's a 1 or a 0, those are easy to do in your head, because if you substitute a 1 in to your original equation for your x's, you're going to get 2 times 1 squared, so that's just 2, minus 4 times 1, which is 4, so 2 minus 4 is negative 2, and then add 8, that's just 6. So our answer to this is going to be 1 comma 6, because again, I want to see ordered pairs here, not just the y coordinate. So 1 comma 6. There you go. Again, all they gave us is the y coordinate there. All right, homework assignment is there, as I have there, using asterisks. Don't find the domain and range on those. That's not something that we talked about today. Okay, I don't want you to do that. If we jump to the huddle, whoops, wrong huddle, 9-1 huddle. Those bottom 3 now you should be able to do. Pause the video, work on those, and then unpause and I'll share the answers. All right, 4A minimum, so you have a minimum on this. B, you should have 1 comma negative 6. That is your vertex for this, which is the minimum in this case. And then part C, again, the order does not matter here. The y-intercept is negative 5. The axis of symmetry is x equals 1. The vertex is 1 comma negative 6. Number 5, that's a maximum because you have a negative as your a value there, so you have a maximum. Part B should be 2 comma 3. That is your maximum value. And part C, y-intercept is negative 1. Axis of symmetry is x equals 2. Vertex is 2 comma 3. And then number 6, A maximum, B negative 2 comma 15. C, y-intercept is 3. Axis of symmetry x equals negative 2. And the vertex is negative 2 comma 15. So you should be noticing, right, if you understand what's going on here, part B, your answer in all your part B's matches the vertex that you should be writing in part C, because your maximum or minimum is always going to be the same as your vertex. All right, so again, as I mentioned yesterday, if those went well for you, or if you only made a couple mistakes but you understand what's going on, you're feeling pretty good, then you are ready for the mastery for today, which is just these 2 questions. Very similar to the ones we just did. If on the huddle and throughout the lesson you did not feel good, you need extra help, or you need to ask some sort of question or whatever the case may be, then get in touch with me, or if nothing else, ask one of your classmates, and we'll make sure that we get you feeling good before you have to move on to the mastery. And then again, there's your homework assignment for tonight.